Hi, my name is John Griffin. I'm here with my good friend Njeru Nthigah, and we're laughing because I always butcher his name, and I apologize, but I actually got it right this time. So, Njeru, I'm glad you're here. We've got some important stuff we want to talk about, and if it's okay with you, I'll just let people know. I kind of, last week was a crazy week, right?
Yes, it
I
was.
mean, we had some what we both view as senseless killings uh, at the hands of some police or law enforcement, and then we had the tragedy that occurred in Dallas. And when that occurred, I at the same time, Njeru had put just before the Dallas events happened. Njeru had put a very passionate thing out on Facebook um, that really just moved me, and it also. But after Dallas, I wanted to call Njeru and just have an honest dialogue. And what I mean by that is what we both had discussed. And I'm going to shut up here in a minute, Drew, to let you talk.
Yeah.
But I called Njeru because I needed a friend to talk to, and I didn't want a friend who thought like I did or maybe saw things the way I did. And what I mean by that, and Drew and I both are very familiar with this, so I'm going to share it with you, a concept of both Drew and I, the way we think about some things. And everything that we look at, whether it's the shootings last week or the crud that happened in Dallas with the killing of the police officers, they're all a beach ball. It's the things that we look at. We all see a beach ball. But what Njeru see might be these colors over here, what's that, yellow, blue, and a little bit of red there. But what I see on my side are green, orange, and white, green, orange, and white. But we're looking at a beach ball. And so when I called Njeru, I was specifically was saying, Njeru, what do you see on your side of the beach ball? Because I'm, let's face it, I'm a white guy and he's a black guy. That's the labels that society has put on us. That's what, if there's any other, well, I'm sure there's all kinds of other names they could have for us, right, Drew? But for it's our intent here, I'm white, you're black. I'm stating the obvious.
Yeah.
Okay. And so we, for purposes of this discussion, not even taking into account all of the other factors in our life, there's all kinds of things that play into the perspectives that we look at these beach balls. But I wanted to call Njeru because I really wanted to understand his side of the beach ball, and hopefully at the same time that he wanted to understand, my side, and we could have an honest dialogue without any kind of judgment on one another, which is very easy for me with Njeru because I love this man. He's a brother. And so, Njeru, thank you for having that conversation. And we both agreed we would revisit some of that just to really show how raw this is. And I'm sure it's some things that other people might be thinking and just are afraid to talk about. And frankly, I told you, dude, I want to be able to talk to you and speak honestly because I'm not a racist, but I think anybody else who would ever hear what I had to say or the things I'm wrestling with would be very quick to say, dude, you're a racist. And same thing, if the things you'd say, they would call you a racist. And both of us know that's not the case. So what have I missed here, Njeru, in setting this up for the things we want to talk about?
Well, I think you've covered it, John, and I really do want to acknowledge you. And I think that the fact that we are here having a conversation, I think the genesis, the beginning of this journey, the beginning of healing is going to be us really getting to a place where we are not talking at one another and we start talking to one another.
Yes.
We all have our fears, we all have our concerns, and we all have our reality, which is my side of the beach ball, which is different from your side of the beach ball. Mm-hmm. And I think that when I posted this, my frustration on Facebook the other day, this was prior to the Dallas shooting, was a genuine concern, a genuine fear, genuine frustration. And I was angry. And I think, John, I was trying to grapple with what was happening. I was trying to grapple with, where are we? This is 2016, for God's sake. You know, where have we gotten to as a society, as a human being, where we don't value life?
Yeah.
Where one life is more valuable than the other. All lives are sacred. God's created us to be equal. And just as much as you have the right to be here, John, I do, irrespective of my complexion and your complexion. I think that we've got to stop playing God and realize that God was smart enough to make this world as beautiful with all the colors and complexions that come with it.
Yes.
And I want to acknowledge you because, first and foremost, other than the fact that I know you as a man, I know you as a brother, I know you as a friend, I know where your heart is. And I gladly sit into this conversation with you because of that basis. I know that there's going to be somebody who's going to think we don't know enough and we haven't figured it out. And I'm sure, I think the purpose of us having this conversation is not because we have all the answers.
Right.
The purpose of us having this conversation is so that we can talk through this. We can try and figure it out. So I think that, until we sit down and first and foremost acknowledge that we do indeed have our different sides of the beach ball. And life occurs differently for you as it occurs for me, yet we live in the same environment. I think that I was truly frustrated by the fact that when I woke up that morning and I said to myself, John, is there a possibility that I may never see my grandchildren? Is there a possibility that if my taillight was broken, that's enough to have me killed? Yeah. That if I took a wrong turn, that would be enough to have me killed? I am asking to have for the same benefit of doubt that everybody else has. Now, I'm going to be the first person to say this, John, and I think we're in agreement to this. You and I value what the men in blue do, the men and women in blue do. Mm-hmm. We value the fact that today we have the right to come home, to have a safe place to travel, to be all we can because of their sacrifice.
Yeah.
I think that it's the most noble thing you can do. I don't even know when I think about it, I wake up in the morning and I do what we do without the concern and fear that I might not come back home and see my wife. That's not a reality. That's a reality for them. And I really, I'm present to the fact that they are working under difficult conditions. They're working under very situations that you and I would never be able to understand. Yeah. But in that same sphere where we say that there is absolute honor and respect for what they do, I think there's a bunch of them that are trigger happy. I think there's a bunch of people who have decided to make this into a Wild West. And unfortunately, my frustration comes, John, from the fact that we've had deaths back and back and back and back, but there are no convictions. What you're seeing is pent-up frustration of the fact that you kill people and there's no conviction. You kill people and there's no conviction. So, John, when I live home today, and I tell my wife I will be back at 9 o'clock, and for any reason I am late, John, she sits up.
Sure.
When I call in, the first thing she asks me is, everything okay? It's not, how was your day?
Right.
It's not, where you, it's, are you okay? That's the first thing. So she's up not because she's scared. She's up because she doesn't know what's happening. Mm-hmm. When I live in the morning, I've got to question myself, well, is this the day? And when I think about it, when I look at those two young black men who passed away, if it would be me, it didn't matter what I do, what I'm trying to do, who I'm becoming, what I'm pursuing. It's nothing. It would have been just another black man who just got killed. And I think that is scary.
I agree with you, Njeru. And, one of the things that we talked about specifically when I called you last week is, I was awakened to the fact that, when we talked about beach ball, from your side of the beach ball, you made a powerful observation, which was, when the things in Dallas happened, I put up on my Facebook, I was like, man, praying, God help us, God help those people. And you made a strong observation. You said, how many people did that prior to Dallas? How many people did it for those kids, the two gentlemen that were killed? And, and that's convicting. And I fully acknowledge that. And I was convicted by that because I didn't. And I want to make people privy to the discussion that we had because that didn't make me a racist. Because it didn't mean that I didn't care about those people, although I am convicted about that. It has raised an awareness for me. But what it woke me up to was there's some perceptions there, though, because of the sign. For example, one of the part that I had shared with you, and I'm going to just be transparent here, is, when those things happen, I didn't get into the details at first. I just saw a blue uniform and that somebody died. And so in my mind, the way I was raised, I honor the uniform. I give benefit of the doubt to the uniform. The uniform and the victim, there was no color involved for me. It was victim, uniform. Well, obviously, the one in uniform was right, but in the cases this week, I don't believe that. Now, knowing and looking into it, it hasn't been tried yet. All the details aren't out. Fully acknowledge that. But my opinion, some people got ahead of themselves. And so the other thing that you and I talked about was intent versus actions. We saw the action, so we're judging it. And something that you and I both teach a lot is we judge others by their action, but we judge ourselves by our intentions. Except in situations, it's magnified. We saw a police officer shoot somebody, and so I can see how when we judge the actions of that we might even go so far and polarize it by saying, man, they intended to walk up to that car and shoot that person. Well, that part I honestly don't know. But what we do know is that they did. I don't know what's in their heart at all. I would love to think that it was completely unintentional. I would love to think that. I don't know. But I do know that there were two lives that did not have to be taken. And that's a tragedy. I hate that. That doesn't solve the problem.
It doesn't. But
it just is what it is. It's where it's my side of the beach ball, right?
And what a great example that you bring, John, because when we talk about the side of the beach ball, I gave you my side of the beach ball when I look at that situation. So again, it's not an indictment. It is just what it is. 2 African-American male die. And it's people rise. I see nothing about nobody putting prayers. And 5 policemen die. And there are prayer chains running all over Facebook.
Yeah.
And as a black man, my question is, therefore, the 5 are more deserving of prayer as compared to the 2. So here we have a death. Suddenly, we are no longer talking about the number of deaths. We are talking about 5, which is tragic. Again, there is no debate. It is absolutely insane. In no way do I condone it. Absolutely insane. But we are no longer talking about the fact that there were 7 deaths. There were 7 people who died. There was 5 policemen, and there was 2 African-American people. There were 5 human beings who died. Yeah. When I look at it from my side of the beach ball, there's a clear demarcation of where value lies. So is there slightly more value on the 5 than there are on the 2? The 2 died. Has anybody spoken about their children, who they wanted to be, what they wanted to be? And I look at the same context of coverage that is given to the 5. I can tell you who they are, when they got married. One got married recently, how many children here, how many years they served. That to me is an imbalance. And I think also for me, it's also an indictment on the media, that you've got to give every situation equal play, because these were 7 lives. Now, the young man who went and killed the 5 policemen is no different in what he did, being unacceptable. It's tragic. He reminds me of the young man who went into a church and killed the parishioners. They were African American. He's no different.
Yeah.
Violence is never going to be the solution.
Mm-hmm.
Violence is never going to be the solution. But if we are going to be honest to be able to talk about it, is I've got to be able to come to the table and tell you that's what I see.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, when some and then there goes somebody else, and I've had everybody go flip around and talk about, for example, this concept of Black Lives Matter. I believe all lives matter.
Yeah.
But the Black Lives Matter is a call. It's a rallying cry for people who are telling you we are being killed and nobody's being persecuted. It's a rallying call. And here it is. It may be an organization, but this is how real it is for me. I'm a Black life. There's something that, John, you end with every email you send to me.
Yes.
What do you say?
You matter.
You didn't say you're white, you matter. You didn't say you're Black, you matter. You matter. You're God's child. You're God's children. So when I look at a conversation like that, and I look at politicians who are saying it's a farce, it's irrespective, or it's some crazy organization, what you're beginning to tell me is you've reduced my life to a farce. You've reduced my ability, my being, my creation to a story, yeah. and therefore creates this unnecessary tension, which I think, the fear. The concern. John, I'm going to ask you a question, John. When you see a policeman driving behind you, do you have a concern?
Only that I might get a ticket. I honestly, I'm not trying to second guess where you're heading, but I never fear for my life.
Yeah.
I don't fear any kind of discrimination or anything like that. And it very well, yes, I'll just leave it at that.
Your concern's a ticket.
Yeah.
My concern is a life.
Yeah.
It can go from a ticket to my life.
Absolutely.
See how big a scope it is? It could result to anything. It's not about a ticket. The benefit of the fact that when I'm driving and I'm with my wife and she will ask me to slow down, and she'll do, not because we're avoiding a ticket. You can pay a ticket. That's not a big deal. But what she's asking me is, I'm basically, I have a choice at that very moment between life and death.
Yeah. And Njeru, let me just say this. I can't relate.
Yep.
I fully acknowledge that. There's no way I can wrap my mind around it. Even as you're saying that, we promised each other we'd have honest dialogue. So I'm going to give you the internal dialogue. And remind me to come back to the Black Lives Matter thing too, because I think it's important to say something there for beach ball purposes. I'm so glad I blew this thing up before we got on here. But it's hard. Even the internal dialogue for me is, as you say, you fear about a ticket, which I said, and you fear about your life. Inside I'm going, how can you possibly think that? I've watched the media, and I believe that the media has really not overblown stats, because the stats are the stats. They are what they are. Unfortunately, I think we only see the bad things going on, and we don't see the good things going on a lot of times. Okay. But I'm fully acknowledging it's hard for me to relate to that. And I believe that there's probably a lot of people that just heard what you said that were very quick to pass judgment and say, you know what, everything else he says doesn't matter because he's one of those guys that's just, blowing it out of proportion. Well, no. One of the things we said is, when we're going to look at the beach ball, we're going to suspend our beliefs, we're going to seek to understand. I'm just acknowledging to you that internal dialogue, because going back to the Black Lives Matter, in each of our cultures, okay, so that's my nice way of saying, I'm a white guy, you're a black guy, and, the obvious. But the reality is the black culture has no monopoly on bad people. And the white culture has no monopoly on good people. We each, it's not a color thing, it's a heart thing. And the reality is is there are some folks that are doing some things under the banner of Black Lives Matter that are really giving it a bad name. And so from a media standpoint, and as a white guy, all I see is, people walking down the street yelling pigs in a blanket, something, kill them or whatever it is. And, yelling out this derogatory stuff about killing cops. And then all of a sudden we see cops killed. And so, yeah, I have a bias when somebody says Black Lives Matter movement, not the people, but that movement. I have a bias that comes up because the first thing that comes to my mind are, these are the people that want to kill cops. And oh, by the way, last Thursday, a bunch of cops got killed. Yeah. And so, you can see how that gets.
I fully agree with you. But here's the other thing is this, and like I say, I don't condone any violence, whether it is in the movement, without the movement. I think what was done in Dallas is wrong. I don't think that wishing other cops to be killed is a solution. I don't think it is. Confronting them is the solution. I don't think it is. But here's it is. Let's take out the movement. Let's talk about life. A Black life matters. A white life matters. Human life matter. So I think that, just like in everything that starts with a good intention, there's going to be people who are going to take advantage of it and the others will not. However way it's interacted, and again, I'm also very skeptical when I see what the media tells us and what everything else does. Because again, some of them, our way of venting our frustration is a conversation. And this is just one way. That's another way. They have exercised their right to go out and protest. It is just as right. And everybody. And here's what it is, what I find very interesting, John. If you were to go in to look at some of that movement, it's not Black people only. It's a mix of everybody. There's white people, there's Black people, there's everybody of every color who are there. So when let's take out the emotion out of it and look at it. What are people asking for? They're asking for dialogue. People are asking for that. They're asking that you've got to value my life as much as I value your life. People are asking for you to respect my life as I respect your life. People are asking for the right to live and be all that God created us to be as much as you do and as much as I do. People are asking the fact that, listen, we've got to live together. Now, and this goes back to me, and I think that a lot of this stuff that has gone on now is, you and I teach that leadership is influence. Mm-hmm. When you look at our leadership today, and I quote the political conversation that is going on today, it does not help. It does not help. And if you're going to play to one side to gain a certain leverage, then you'll suddenly be able to frustrate a certain group. We live in a different world where people now understand their rights, where people understand their right to protest, where people are beginning to understand their right to be here.
Yes.
Right? And I think we've got to get to a stage where we actually, like you say, I think where we are getting to is we've got to suspend this bias. We've actually got to sit down on the table and really face what it is, because in our interactions, in our everyday life, and in the years that you and I have been friends, we have so much more in common as human beings. Our desires, what we want, who we want to be, where we want to be, what difference we want to make in the world. We have so much more in common. And the things that are a little bit of a difference in us, I think, is the beauty of life. And if we can merge this difference and realize that this solution is not going to come from the politicians, for sure. No. It's not going to come from the so-called media. It's going to come from us sitting and having a dialogue and actually realizing, you know what? I don't know, when you tell me that you acknowledge the fact that when a policeman is behind you, your only concern is a ticket. I have to acknowledge that, because that's your reality. That's your side of the beach ball.
Yes.
Now, somebody could think I think that you have privilege because you're white. I don't know, man. I really don't even want to go down that road. But that's their life. That's what society has created. Mm-hmm. So if we have to get to a place where we actually ask that we have an equal footing, you and I can sit on a table, that I think that you and I can create a better America, that we can create a better place for our children and our families, that we can sit down and be all we were supposed to be, what God created us to be, because we respect each other, because we honor each other, because we love each other, because we realize that we are better together than we are apart.
Right on. So, Njeru, let me ask you this, because you made some great points here. Where do we go from here? I mean, you know, it's one thing for you and I to have a dialogue, okay? And again, some internal dialogue here. I'm going, how many people, if I were to walk up to a protest and begin sharing my own fears, my own thoughts, how many people would really want to, because one thing you mentioned earlier, and I want to play on that a little bit. You said people are wanting dialogue. I actually don't believe that. I believe people want to be heard. I do believe that. I don't think they're really interested in hearing what other people think too, though, and are willing to listen to that because they're frustrated. And I get that, and I understand that. That's why I appreciate the true dialogue that we have, is because you allowed me last week to come to you and share everything, right? And listen to you, and we both kind of went back and forth of saying, you know, we kept spinning this beach ball, you know, all the way around to really try. And the reality is we turned it this way so we could see all of it. But so I threw out two different things. So I'll just put it this way. Where do you think we go from here, knowing what I just said?
Yeah. So here's what it is. Again, I'll just go back to what you said, that people are not seeking dialogue. I think the experience of people needing to be heard is a result of pent up frustration.
Yes.
Listening. Mm-hmm. When you decide that this is the only option I have, is because ongoingly there's been no space for the conversation. So I here's what it is, John. I honestly believe that. I think if you went and asked African American people and asked, you know, would you rather be on the streets or feeling threatened or not sure whether your sons are going to come home? Do you know that, John, that it's a common conversation within the African American community that you as a father will not go to bed before your sons come home, not because he went to a party, not because he's hanging out with his friends. You're hoping he didn't get shot.
Right.
Now, we all have a responsibility in our own different spheres to fix what is wrong, because, you know, I can hear it in my head where somebody's going to come back and say that there's more black on black crime. And I can hear somebody else coming up with the same story. I am the first person to say that each one of us is responsible in cleaning our house. We have our own responsibility in making sure that it is. But even in this same responsibility that we have, there's a saying: we cannot be a community without having individual homes. Individual homes make a community.
Yeah.
So we have a certain responsibility. There's work to be done in the African American community as much as I think there's work to be done in the Caucasian community. Having said that, I don't think that either of the party wants to be wrangling. I think everybody wants to have the right to be able to be all they can be. I honestly believe that. So I think we've got to get to a stage where we come to a sober conversation. And that requires me to suspend, because the anger that I felt in my heart and the conflict that I had in my heart was two things, John. I know amazing, and you know, I have a problem, you know, I know amazing white people. I mean, many people that have a part of my life and all that stuff. So first and foremost, it would be wrong for me to take a brush because of the effects of two incidents, or not even two, the 100 of incidents that have happened this year. And I took a brush and decided that every white person is a racist.
Right.
So I expect that the same brush is not applied to a black man or to an African American. Yes, there's challenges in a certain area, but don't take this and use that brush and say everybody is wrong. Like you said, every group has its own challenges and every group has its own issues. Here's what I know is I know amazing doctors. I know amazing businessmen. I know amazing pastors and bishops and fathers and mothers and brothers and mentors, and they only just happen to be black. Yes. And I know amazing doctors and business owners and bishops and pastors and influencers that just happen to be white.
Isn't that interesting? You know, at the end of the day, Njeru, yeah, you know, the whole proverbial, yep, I'm white, you're black. You don't bleed black. I don't bleed white. We bleed red. You know, and I don't know the history of how we got the colors that we got. I'm sure some biologist or, you know, anthropologist out there has done their theories on that, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, we're a soul that bleeds red. And so outside of that, I don't know much else. I mean, I grew up in Mississippi and in South Mississippi, and there was a lot of racial tension growing up. And I frankly was glad to get away from that because I got to see a different world earlier on. And I can't imagine how my thoughts would have probably been shaped if I'd have stayed in that. Not slamming everybody in Mississippi, not doing the paintbrush to them either, but it is what it is, or it was what it was. But today, I think what I'd like to do is, if it's okay with you, to kind of wrap up this part of our conversation, because you and I both agree, we're not going to have this full dialogue, and frankly, don't even know how many people watched it this far, because, you know, we both are long-winded. And so I'm going to attempt not to be as long-winded right now and wrap this up. But we wanted to start a dialogue, and we wanted to show that at the end of the day, you know, violence begets violence, and it's not the solution. And you know, we didn't talk about this, but it flashed out a little bit here. You know, that I do believe that people want to be heard. And at some point, somebody's got to agree to shut up long enough to hear. And then they'll get their chance to be heard. But both people in a conversation can't talk at the same time. They got to actually stop and listen and really seek to understand in that. And that's what I appreciate so much about you, Njeru, and about our friendship, that we're able to have that kind of dialogue. And for those of you who might actually be watching this video, Njeru and I are going to continue the conversation. We're going to maybe have it again another day or whenever. But if you've got questions or if you want to chime in on this, feel free. Post. We're both going to post this to our timelines. We're going to allow people to post whatever questions they or comments they have. But I really hope at the end of the day that people will stop with the judgment, stop with their and think about their thinking of their pre-bias, because I had it, I've got it. One thing I do know without an absolute doubt is that both Njeru and I are perfectly imperfect beings. I mean, we're not all that we'd like to be. I would, and I'm sure you would too. And so, Njeru, take us home on this. That's just my final thoughts before we close out this.
Yeah, you know, John, this is what I think. I wrote something here, you know, that I had on my. It says by Albert Einstein. It says, "The world is a dangerous place not because of those who do evil, but because of those who will look on and do nothing."
Hmm.
I had a second quote here that says, "Our dilemma is that we hate change and love it at the same time. What we really want is for things to remain the same but get better."
Hmm.
It's not going to happen.
No.
I think that we need to come to the table. We need to suspend our bias. We need to come and realize that we have genuine concerns.
Yeah.
And I say we, both sides.
Yeah. They're not the same concerns, but they're genuine.
Yes, absolutely. Exactly. They may not be the same, but they're genuine. But also what where I'm also asking is that in part of the dialogue is, for the first time, listen. And I'll listen to what you've got to say. and you listen to what I've got to say. And it could be as simple, John, as we give an example today. A young man was stopped for a taillight, costing his life. I could almost bet you that if you were stopped for a taillight, John, you get a ticket. Your concern in your mind would not be your life. And that's just an example. But so we are coming to the table with a lot of fear, a lot of concern, a lot of confusion and frustration. And I think that we need to get to a place where we realize that the way forward, the future that we all dream for, the future that we want, is not going to be birthed out of violence.
No.
It's not going to be birthed out of hatred. It's not going to be birthed out of suspicion. And it definitely is not going to be birthed out of political discourse. It's going to be birthed out of you and I sitting, of ordinary people sitting and realizing that we can make a difference, and we want a better country, that we want to be a better friend, we want to be a better brother, we want to be better human beings. Now, like we started this conversation, John, I came to this conversation with you not because I was seeking a solution, because I know that we are never going to find it, but I was seeking to understand you.
Yeah.
I was seeking to understand where you're coming from, so that I have an informed view when I sit and talk to you. And we didn't start this conversation because I suspected you're racist, but I was also present to the fact that your life and your experiences have created a certain bias, and so have mine.
Right.
So I think, I hope that people chime in. And here's my honest hope. I hope anybody who chimes in is not to take us down the rabbit hole of where we were yesterday. I hope that you can chime in and move us forward in a conversation of where, let's talk. The greatest place, the starting point is conversation. If we talk and you hear me and I hear you, and I realize that you have certain fears and certain concerns as much as I do, we have a way to bridge them. I'm going to conclude this by saying, John, that I don't think that violence towards the police or the police towards the African American community is a solution.
No.
I totally, and I think you and I agreed on that. Every person has a right. Every life is sacred. I hope that we have this conversation again, John. I think for me, what it has done, it's allowed me to appreciate where you're coming from. It's allowed me to appreciate your side of the beach ball. It's allowed me to tell you as it is. And I said it, I shared it with you as I look at it. When I live today, these are my concerns, or this is where I am, and this is a conversation I have. So I think that I honestly believe in my heart's heart, John, that we can do better. We can do better as human beings. We can do better. And maybe the new generation of leadership is going to come out of conversation, out of us agitating for a common greater future, where we can all live in peace, where we can appreciate one another, where we can thrive and become all we were supposed to be. I hope that's really. I honestly hope that that's where we go. I've really struggled with the word optimistic.
Yeah.
Because every time I want to say optimistic, there's a little voice that wants to have me to say that I'm cautiously optimistic. Right. So I'm not going to say that, because what I want is I believe that in each and every one of us, there's goodness, there's greatness. For some people may think that it's silly.
Nope.
But I think that God wants us to live in peace, that we can be all we can be. And I would love to see you grow old and see your grandchildren. And I would like to do the same.
Right on. So Njeru, I will put you on the spot because it's a thought, and I probably should have stopped the recording to see what you thought about this. But when you said that, we thought, whatever we talk about, we'll just have a dialogue and maybe invite people to comment. What would you say if maybe in a couple of weeks we set up a call and allow maybe 8 people to join us? I can actually have up to 50 people on this, but I don't I don't think it would serve us well in that big of a group. But we'll invite some folks to come and join us, but specifically to do what you just said. Let's not talk about yesterday, but where do we go from here? And I want to give a caveat to all of this, is don't for 1 minute think that Njeru or I are saying that the answer to this is simply talking. The beginning of the answer is authentic dialogue, what we're doing here. But there's still action that has to be taken. So we're not sitting here saying, oh, we're just going to sit around a table and talk. No. Because there's some people that believe that that's all, that pie in the sky folks just advocate sitting around talking about. No. At the end of this, and we don't know what those answers are, but at the end of this, there's got to be actions, because I don't believe that there's anybody, and I'm doing the broad paintbrush now, but I don't know of anybody that's in our current political system that has the guts to take any action, has the guts to sit at any table for dialogue, because we've had no examples of that in the current political system. And I'm not just talking about our White House or Congress or any of that. I'm talking all across the board. So I'm doing the big paintbrush. So I just want to give that caveat. So Njeru, if you would like, and we'll talk about it after I stop the recording, but you can comment here. We can invite some others, have some honest dialogue about what do we think we can do from our sides of the beach ball going forward. What do you think?
I like the idea, and I'm suddenly open. Like I said, dialogue is the beginning of the conversation, and I think that even I'm going to be the first person to say this, John. Just because we're saying let's move this conversation forward, I want us to acknowledge what is.
Yes.
What is. This is what each community is feeling. This is what we experience, because I think us being able to face it as it is creates an honest foundation for further conversation. But I really hope that out of this dialogue, the next best step what's the next best step? And could this dialogue lead to a place where we have enough people to move political muscle? That would be fantastic. Would this dialogue be strong enough to be able to move the quote unquote leaders in either party that is there and start saying, listen, let's dial in. Let's sit down now and realize that what you say has an effect. Yes. What you do has an effect. So it's not just about talking. I think we've got to always be honest to what is. We've always got to be able to finish a conversation by asking, what can we do? Not just talk. But I think that a lot of us, and I think you and everybody else and all of us, we were sad because there was a tragedy which we faced with the death of the 2 young men. Yeah. And then there was the death of the 5 policemen. I think this whole week was a heavy week for everybody.
Yes.
And all of us are trying to make sense of this sort of tragedy. And I think at the end of it all, my concern is this the story of the week? And then something is going to happen next week and we've forgotten about it until the next time. So what we really have become is a community that just reacts.
Right.
Reacts to situation. And some communities are reacting because that's where they live. This is what is happening. But maybe we just need to really get down to thinking, okay, how do we become proactive at creating an America that we want?
Absolutely. And the beginning of that is for this dialogue, because if we don't begin the conversation, there's going to be people with megaphones that are going to dictate the conversation that we don't want to take part in.
They're sounding louder than we are, and there's
absolutely more. And that's got to end. And I think we both agree that. I'll tell you what, Njeru, I will set that up. But let me tell you, as I close this out, I just want to tell you I appreciate you, brother. I realize that, we did this unscripted. I'm not even looking at my little camera up here. I'm looking at your picture on my screen there. So that's why I'm probably looking like I'm not doing eye contact. But at the end of the day, man, I take a bullet for you. I don't say that lightly, because I really appreciate you. I love you, man. And thank you for having this conversation.
John, and I extend the same. I think that, us having, other than me knowing who you are as a person and having the privilege of knowing you over the years and being blessed by who you are, I think you're just a simply phenomenal human being. I am blessed by your friendship. I'm blessed by what we get to do together. I think that I know that I have no idea, and I have no, I don't know where this conversation goes, but I'm glad I did it with you.
Right on. And I look forward to more.
I know that we took the time to get to know one another, to get to know each other at this deeper level. And I love you, man. I love you. I love you for being my brother. I love you for being on this journey called life with me.
Yeah.
And like we said, as imperfect as we are, I would rather the fact that we are trying to make it better together than trying to make it better apart.
Right on. And we'll end with that. Thank you, brother.